Good morning, church, and welcome to the online worship of the Park Rapids Church of Christ. We are continuing our series of lessons on the subject of our relationship with God as it relates to prayer. And a few weeks ago, we looked at Jesus teaching us to pray. One of his disciples asked, "Lord, teach us to pray." And one of the passages that we looked at was found in Luke chapter 18, verse 1, where Jesus told his disciples a story about how they should keep on praying and never give up. And then he goes on to tell a story that illustrates that about a woman that comes to a judge who doesn't want to listen to her. And so in the end, because of her persistence, because she keeps coming to him, he answers her request. And God is teaching us the importance of the persistence of prayer. And in that same passage, verses 7 and 8, Luke 18, verses 7 and 8, it says, "God will surely give justice to his people who plead with him day and night. Yes, he will answer them quickly." But the question is, when I, the Messiah, Jesus says, return, how many will I find who have faith and are praying? Are we people who are going to keep on praying? Are we going to, as we talked about that same week, are we going to push? When we come against those heavy obstacles, are we going to push or pray until something happens? That's what God is calling us to do. That's what he challenges us, encourages us to do. And with the idea, when Jesus comes back, is he going to find people with faith who are continuing to pray, praying until something happens? So we're going to start with this: keep praying. But understand, there are obstacles to prayer. And that's what we're going to look at today. I think sometimes we go into prayer knowing the power of prayer, knowing that God works through prayer. And then when we don't get the answer we expect, or it doesn't come right away, we start to conclude, maybe this prayer really doesn't work, and we start to doubt. Well, I want us to understand that there are obstacles to prayer. And if we understand that, then we can help to push through those obstacles. Again, pray until something happens. And so we're going to talk about those obstacles that the Bible identifies. And I am assuming that there are more than these. In fact, I know that there are more than these that I'm listing here. But these are some of the main obstacles that are listed in the Word of God as it comes to our prayer, obstacles to our prayer. So that's the title of this lesson: Obstacles to Prayer. So first of all, we're going to look at the obstacles from within. That there are obstacles within us that cause us to not pray, or to give up on prayer, or not to be effective in our prayers. So, first of all, these obstacles within, and again, remember, this is all related to relationships, and primarily our relationship with God. So we're going to start with these obstacles from within as we deal with our relationship with God. And first of all, I want us to go to Psalm 66, verses 18 and 19. Psalm 66, verses 18 and 19. It says, "If I had confessed the sin in my heart, the Lord would not have..." I'm going to start again. "If I had not confessed the sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened." But God did listen. He paid attention to my prayer. Sometimes, listen to this, sometimes that obstacle to prayer is our unconfessed sin. If we're hiding sin, if we're holding on to sin, if we are not making sure we are right with God like we talked about a couple weeks ago with Job, then there is going to be an obstacle. There's going to be a hindrance to our prayers. Secondly, go to 1 John chapter 5, verse 14. 1 John chapter 5, verse 14. It says, we have courage in God's presence because we are sure that he hears us if we ask him for anything that is according to his will. And there is a key. Your will be done. Jesus taught that in the Lord's Prayer, the model prayer that we talked about a couple weeks ago, to pray, thy will, God, your will be done. Jesus exemplified that in his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane when he prayed, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, your will be done. The problem is if we are praying from self-will, that's where the obstacle comes in. So another obstacle to prayer is self-will, not God's will. When we are praying according to our will, what we want, what we desire, what we think should happen. Now, it's okay to approach God with our request, but if we go with the attitude of God, give me what I want, he's not going to hear us. He's not going to listen. He's not going to grant the request because we're coming with an attitude of demanding, of expectation. But when we come with hope, when we come desiring, and we conclude that prayer with, but not my will, your will be done, just like Jesus did, then God does hear our prayer and he will answer. One more verse on this obstacle from within with our relationship with God. It's found in James chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. James chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Here it says, when you ask for anything, and here remember, this is James, the half-brother of Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph, where Jesus was the son of Mary and God. And so James grew up with Jesus, and so he saw Jesus and his prayer life exemplified. And so listen to what he says about prayer. He says, when you ask for something, don't have any doubts. A person who has doubts is like a wave that is blown by the wind and tossed by the sea. A person who has doubts shouldn't expect to receive anything from the Lord. Here, don't go into prayer with doubts. And how often do we do that? How often do we approach prayer with this almost a wish mentality? We don't really believe that the prayer is going to be answered. We don't really believe that we're going to receive what we ask for. So it's almost like a wish. We're just wishing for something. And that sounds a whole lot like doubt. But it says here, if we approach it with faith and not doubt. And so I believe that a third obstacle that comes from within in our relationship with God is lack of faith. So we've seen these three: unconfessed sin, self-will, and lack of faith that cause us to have obstacles within us in our prayer life. But it's not just about with our relationship with God. What about with our relationship with others? Remember, the two most important commands in the Bible sums up all the other laws. And that is, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Second, love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love others. It's all about relationships. So again, there can be an obstacle from within with our relationship with God. And yes, there are obstacles from within with our relationship with others. First one I want to look at is in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. And here it's talking about the husband-wife relationship, but I believe that it applies to any close relationship. And listen to what it says. In the same way, you husbands must give honor to your wives. Treat your wife with understanding as you live together. She may be weaker than you are, but she is your equal partner in God's gift of new life. Treat her as you should. Why? So your prayers will not be hindered. And I believe that's just as true for wives in their relationship with husbands, because this close relationship, and it happens with our relationships with anyone who is very close. Because if we have a relationship with someone that has a hindrance, an obstacle, if there's a problem within this relationship, so often that goes into every area of our life, and especially our relationship with God, in that relationship with Him, in that communication with Him. And so if we have relational discord, so this is another obstacle to prayer, and that is relational discord. A relationship that has issues, that have problems, lack of communication, lack of relationship, that affects our prayer life, because prayer is about our relationship with God. And if we've got a break in our relationship with someone, that's going to affect our relationship with God. Next one. Remember, this is again about obstacles from within, but about our relationship with others. It's found in Mark chapter 11, verses 25 and 26. Mark 11, 25 and 26. And here it says, and whenever you stand praying, there it is, prayer, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you your wrongdoing. But if you don't forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your wrongdoing. He says, if you're praying, make sure that you have forgiven those in your life. Someone that has wronged you, someone that has done something against you. Forgive them. Because if you don't, if you're holding that unforgiveness against someone else, that is going to hinder your relationship with God. That's going to hinder your prayers and God's forgiveness of you. So, we've looked at 5 things, obstacles that come from within in a relationship with God, a relationship with others. Unconfessed sin, self-will, lack of faith, relational discord, and unforgiveness. All of those are hindrances. All of those are obstacles to prayer. But that's from within. Now we're going to look at obstacles from without, from on the outside of us. Ephesians 6, and we looked at this again a few weeks ago as we talked about spiritual warfare, about being prayer warriors. It says in Ephesians 6 and verse 12, says, for we are not fighting against people made of flesh and blood, but against persons without bodies, the evil rulers of the unseen world, those mighty satanic beings and great evil princes of darkness who rule this world, and against huge numbers of wicked spirits in the spirit world. Remember, I would like to believe that my prayers are just my prayers to God, that it's just me and God in this close relationship, but we need to understand we live in a world at war. And we're not talking about physical war and war between flesh and blood people. We're talking about a spiritual war that's going on all around us, between the heavenly beings, between the angels and the demons, between God and the rebellious servant Satan. And so that is what we're talking about here. And so if that's the case, do you suppose that our prayers don't face obstacles? Let's look at an example. It's found in the book of Daniel, chapter 10. Daniel, chapter 10, verses 1 through 13. Daniel 10, 1 through 13. A great story. And here's a little plug for our Wednesday night Bible class. We are currently in a chronological study of the Old Testament, a rather deep, in-depth study in chronological order of the Old Testament. And right now we're getting close to the end. We are in the book of Daniel. And we'll be looking at this story in a couple of weeks. But in Daniel chapter 10, starting in verse 1, it says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belteshazzar. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotions at all until 3 weeks were over. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of finest gold around his waist. His body was like chrysolite, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. The men with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and as I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep, my face to the ground. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. And so, understand this. According to Daniel 10, 1 through 13, Satan opposes our prayer. Satan and his demons, Satan and the forces of evil and darkness oppose our prayers. Look at again here, Daniel 12 and, Daniel 10 and verse 12. Daniel 10, verse 12, it says, Then he said to me, don't be frightened, Daniel, for your request. Remember, Daniel prayed, and for 21 days he doesn't get an answer. He says, don't be afraid, Daniel, for your request has been heard in heaven and was answered the very first day you began to fast before the Lord and pray for understanding. That very day I was sent here to meet you. 21 days earlier, Daniel began to pray. And the angel comes and says, Daniel, I was sent in response to your prayer as soon as you started praying. 21 days ago, God heard and God answered. So that's our first point. God hears and answers immediately. Now, that doesn't mean we always see the answer right away. That doesn't mean we always receive the answer right away. Sometimes God is telling us to be patient, but other times the plan, the prayer, the answer is obstructed. Let's go on. Verse 13, the first part of verse 13, it says, But for 21 days the mighty evil spirit who overrules the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Apparently there was a demon that was over the nation of Persia. He was overseeing, and he stopped this angel from delivering this message to Daniel. This demon was fighting against this angel, keeping him from delivering this message. And so understand, demons put up obstacles to your prayers, to my prayers, to our prayers. There are demons. And let me ask you this. Do you suppose if there was an evil spirit who is in charge of the kingdom of Persia, do you suppose there's an evil spirit that Satan has put in charge of the United States of America? I'm sure it's the truth. And we need to be praying for those angels to have victory over those demons that are working to bring harm and discord and distrust to our nation. And so the next point then. So we've seen God hears and answers immediately, and we see demons put up obstacles. Look at the end of verse 13. It says, Then Michael, one of the top officers of the heavenly army, came to help me. so that I was able to break through these spirit rulers of Persia. And so the angel says, I was fighting for 21 days to get through. Finally, Michael, a chief angel, the archangel, one of the chief officers in God's army, came and he took over the fight and made it a breakthrough so that I could break free and come and deliver this. So listen. Final point here, angels fight to break through. They are fighting all around us to break through the forces of darkness to make sure that our prayers get to God and our prayers come back answered to us. And so we need to understand that. And so in 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 17, it's easy to understand why God tells us through the Apostle Paul, never stop praying. Because we are sending out forces of light, forces of God's army to accomplish His will. And just because it seems like sometimes our prayers are slow in answering, or they don't seem like we're getting an answer, understand there is an enemy that is trying to oppose our prayers. They are putting obstacles in the way, and we need to keep praying. So final thing, remember this. Keep praying for these breakthroughs. Keep praying for these angels to get breakthroughs in answer to our prayers, to accomplish what God's will is. Remember, because it's about His will. So recognize that there's obstacles that come from within, and that's for you and God to work through. You need to go to God, and then there are the obstacles from without, the forces of darkness, and that's where you keep praying. And those angels will keep fighting, and they will overcome, and they will accomplish God's will. So keep praying. Continue to pray right through every single obstacle to prayer. But recognize there are obstacles. And if we recognize that, then that gives us the focus, the commitment, the persistence to keep on praying. Pray until something happens. God bless, and keep praying.